All right, so video two, we got a robot moving around the screen, or whatever your bad guy is. Um, there's a couple things I neglected to do in the first video that I should have done. Here I am trying to be a good example, and I didn't do two very important things. Thing number one is I didn't give this game a name. It's right now mine's called Untitled 10. Yours is probably Untitled 2 or 3 or something like that. We need to give it a better name so that way it's easier for us to find, especially when you end up having like 50 million games in Scratch. You want to be able to find I'm going to go back and find this old game I made. Untitled 17 is not very descriptive, right? So maybe we'll just call this like how about Space Shooter. And this little character that I use right here, it's called an underscore. It's like the minus or dash key, so, like that. But if you hold down the shift key, it makes that little line. We call it an underscore. Um, I would really recommend you get in the habit of using something like that, especially when you're typing in more than one word. You could just call it space shooter. Um, you could even do a capital S. So that's actually something called camel case. You will find people who will get in huge arguments who are like professional coders and programmers as to what's the best way to name things. I like underscores. I don't know why. I think they look cool. I think it makes you look like a real hacker when you type in things like that. It doesn't really matter, but I will say spaces hooter. I don't what like sometimes when you have a really long name, if you don't have that underscore, it's hard to know where the last word ended and the next word began. Um, you could theoretically use a space in between, but ironically, in the space shooter game, you have space. Okay, that's a long way of me saying I think that when you're coding and programming, underscores are the best way to show you have a second or third or fourth word in some variable or name or something like that. Other people may say that's dumb. I don't really care. Name your game. The other thing we need to do is our guy, whatever you chose, the bat, the robot, whatever you drew your own thing, we need to give him a better name. And as we continue coding, you're going to learn like, holy cow, you end up with like 50,000 sprites down here and it gets to be this huge mess. And keeping things simple will make your life easier, especially as you get deep into coding a game and things start to break and you got to fix them. Change the name of your bad guy. As a matter of fact, make your bad guy's name Bad Guy. Okay, bad underscore guy. There you go. Okay, so now we have a name for a game. Now we have a name for our bad guy. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add a little function that I think will just make things look nicer. We're going to add a crosshair. So if you've ever played like a first-person shooting game, which you probably should in elementary school, but I'm no dummy. I know you guys play Fortnite and stuff like that. You probably have seen on the screen there's like a little target, right? A little like thing that shows like where you're aiming. Well, that's called a crosshair. And so we're going to add a crosshair to our game. It's actually super easy to add. So we're going to do that right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, we're not going to choose a sprite. We're going to have to draw this. So we're going to go to paint, right? So go down here and say paint, and we're going to make so right now it's called sprite one. We're going to get in good habits. We're going to change that name to crosshair. So we already named it before we even done anything. Now this is going to be real important. And this is where we're going to draw it. Do you see this little, it actually is a crosshair. That's not going to show up on the screen, but this is real important. This shows us that whatever we decide to draw, this shows us where the exact center of the drawing is. So if I draw this over here, it may not make sense right this second, but this right here, the exact center of it is actually over here, kind of on top of this robot. I'm going to erase this because I'm going to Control Z to undo instead of erasing. I can't undo it. There we go. What we're going to do is we're going to try our best to draw a crosshair. If we want to be simple, we can say, hey, I'm going to draw a line. I'm going to try and make it go right over the center of this thing. There. And another one, I'm going to be as exact as I can without driving myself nuts. Okay, that's my crosshair. If you want to get real fancy, you could even, I don't want this to be filled. So I'm going to try and draw a circle around that. When I click this, if I do that, see how it's purple right now? I don't want a purple circle. I want a circle that doesn't have any color in it. So that little line says, hey, no fill, no color, leave it just blank in the middle. Just like that. Okay, now I have a crosshair. Take that, bad guy. All right, now I'm going to go. So remember, now that we have two sprites, we have a bad guy and we have, oh, it changed my name. I don't want Sprite. I want Crosshair. That's my name. Now that we have a bad guy and now that we have a Crosshair sprite, we're going to have to really be careful about which one we're clicked on. The number one thing that kids always used to go like, oh, my game, I can't find my code. I'm like, are you clicked on the right sprite? Because remember, the bad guy, he has all this code right here. We're going to add code to our crosshair. Our crosshair doesn't have anything in it right now. So if you can't find your code, if it's lost, the first thing or even worse, you're clicked on stage. Remember, you can also add code on like the actual background. So make sure you're clicked on your crosshair sprite. Okay, we're going to add some code. What I want is I want this crosshair basically to move around the screen wherever our mouse is. That's where I want the crosshair to be. I want it to kind of follow us. I can click on it and drag it around, but that's not going to work for our game. So this is super simple. We're going to go down to events and we're going to say, hey, when the green flag is clicked, you're going to do something forever. And the thing you're going to do, Crosshair, is you're going to go to not a random position. You're going to go to the mouse pointer. The mouse pointer is this mouse, the little cursor thing, that little guy. So if I click the green flag, see how it kind of follows me around now? So if I go full screen, now I can okay, now the game doesn't actually do anything, but I've got a little crosshair following me around on the screen now, right? Now I can aim at stuff. Okay, that's kind of cool. All right. Now, how are we going to get this game to recognize that we're shooting at the robot? Well, this is going to take a few steps. I think step number one is we just need like a score. We need a little score that just says, hey, every time you hit the robot, +1 to your score. Okay, well, that sounds like if we have a number that's going to start probably at 0, right? Score is going to start at 0, and every time we hit the robot, it's going to go up by a number. Sounds to me like we need a number that varies. We need a variable. So we're going to make a variable. So we're going to go down to variables. We could add this. So this is kind of tricky. We could add this code to the bad guy or to the crosshair. Let's add it to the crosshair. So I'm still going to stay in crosshair. We may change our mind later and be like, actually, this code should be in the bad guy. But let's just start it here. So we're going to say, hey, let's make a variable. So I'm in crosshair. I went down to variables. We're going to say make a variable. And we'll call it, here's a descriptive name, score. We'll say score is for all sprites. So everything in the game can use this variable called score. We're going to click OK. All right, now I have a score. It's 0. That's a pretty fair start. Let's go ahead and just make sure Scratch knows, hey, every time the game starts, I want you to take that variable called score and set it to 0. Okay? Every time. Just when the game starts, the very first thing Scratch is going to do is say, hey, that variable score, it might be 100 from the last time you played it. Just turn it back into 0. Okay, now how are we going to get the game to recognize that we hit the robot? It's a good question. Sounds like we need the game to, we're going to do something and it's going to like kind of work, but then definitely not work. And then we're going to have to clean up our mess. So you'll see what I mean in a minute. We need a sensor. We need like something, the game to be like, oh, hey, guess what? I sense that the cursor is on, the crosshair is on the robot and the user pressed a button. So what we're going to do is we are going to make what's called a broadcast. All right. We're going to make a fire button and we're going to say it's the space key. So I am going to move over to the code for the bad guy. So I'm back in the bad guy's code. We were in the crosshair. Now I'm back to the bad guy. We're going to say we want the space key to be pressed. So when the user presses the space bar, we want something to happen. And that thing that's going to happen is an event. So we're going to say we want a broadcast to be sent. A broadcast is just a message. If you notice, it says broadcast. So I'm over here in events. We're going to say when the space key is pressed. Now, we could just leave this as message 1, but keeping in our theme of we need to name things so they make sense to us, message 1, you may be like, okay, I know what it's going to do now, but when we get deep in the game, you might be like, wait, what is this thing doing again? I don't know what message 1 means. We're going to say, we're going to make it a new message. And so this little menu pops up. We're going to say new message. And we're going to say shoot. So this is going to send a message to the game that just says, hey, the space bar has been pressed. Something called shoot is happening. Now, Scratch is real dumb. If I press the flag and I press the space bar, this little thing lights up. Scratch is going, okay, you said send the message called shoot to the game. I don't actually know what shoot means. We haven't told Scratch what to do with that message. So here comes the next part. We're going to go back to our crosshair and we're going to add some code. Now, let's do this. If the user shoots, they press the little space key. If they shoot and they hit the robot, let's just say, let's make the score go up by 1. If this user hits the space key and they miss the robot, let's make the score go down by 1. So what we have is we have a condition. If the crosshair is on the robot, +1 to score. If it's not, -1 to score. So what we're going to do is we're going to come down here and we're going to come down and find in the events when I receive. Now this is important. When I receive the message shoot, see how it's already set up because we named it shoot. Now we know, oh, so this bad guy, when the space key gets pressed, it just says, okay, send a message called shoot to everything in the game. We're going to tell the crosshair, so we're back in the crosshair. We say, when you get that message that the space key has been hit and this thing called shoot happens, we're going to make, okay, this is a big guy. It's like a double dinosaur. See, there's if then else. This is a new code block. So we're going to use this if then else. We're going to snap it right there when I receive shoot. All right. We're going to say, hey, crosshair, check this out. If you get the message that the space key has been pressed and something called shoot happens, then what you're going to do is you're going to check. We're going to go to sensing and say, if the crosshair is touching bad guy, let's just make score go up by 1. We're going to say in variables, we're going to say change, let's do score by +1. So if touching bad guy, then change score by +1. Okay, I'm going to click my green flag and just test this to make sure it works. Boom. See score go up? Okay, now the second part of this is we said, okay, well, what if you miss the robot? Well, if you miss the robot, we want the score to go down by 1. You can just spam the space bar. Oh, look at that. You can keep shooting and make your score go up. Maybe we don't want that to happen. Okay, well, let's finish this. We're going to say if our crosshair is touching bad guy, when you get that shoot message, I'm going to add 1 to the score. Else, well, this kind of covers everything else. It's just like, hey, if this is happening, then do this. Else means otherwise. If this isn't happening, if you're not touching bad guy, then we'll say, you know what? Let's penalize the user pretty harshly. We're going to say change score. How about by -5? So if you hit him, you get a point. But if you miss, you're losing a lot of points. All right, let's test it. Okay, there he is. Boom, got him. Okay, got him. him. Got him. Okay, I'm going to miss on purpose. Oof. Oh, look at that. Oh, -2, -7. Oh, no, we're losing points. Okay. Yikes. Dug myself a hole. Hey, that's kind of fun. All right, so guess what? In this video, you just figured out how to add code to 2 different sprites. You figured out how to name all the sprites, give them good names, and now you figured out a brand new condition, the if then else. If this is happening, then do this. Otherwise, else, do something else. Man, now we got some things to fix in this game, but we're getting there. So in the next video, let's add a little more functionality. Maybe we can think about adding a timer to make, because otherwise right now the game just kind of does what it does, but maybe we need to make it to where like the user feels like, oh, I'm running out of time, I gotta hurry. So let's add that next.